Hello, dear friends. I know you haven't met everyone for a long time. There will be still wonderful opportunities to talk between Jan and Kai, so also others. So welcome to the session number 2. And I hope we will talk about ecosystem services and how do we integrate ecosystem services into maritime spatial planning. So my name is Kristina Veidemane. I'm representing Baltic Environmental Forum in Latvia. And Baltic Environmental Forum has been one of the project partners of Baltic Sea to Land project. And this session is also jointly organized with colleagues from SLO, Sweden, Lena and Caroline, as well as wonderful inputs from Best Marine Workshop. And probably many of you also have signed to back-to-back workshop, which will be later tomorrow afternoon, where we will continue this discussion. But of course, today we are just launching this session and topic, how do we integrate ecosystem services into maritime spatial planning? When we built this, our session and what we thought, we put in a front ecosystem service concept. Yes, the concept is actually with a long history already, and it got its highlights in 20 years ago with Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which used ecosystem service concept to evaluate the condition of the world's ecosystems and understanding and how changes in ecosystem actually impacts our well-being. And Millennium Ecosystem concept really saw that the approach when we illustrate how ecosystems provide services for us, support our economies, our social life, so-called our human well-being, it brought up this ecosystem service concept as analytical framework according what to organize information and what to present and illustrate different changes. And that's why we see that actually this concept, which is illustrated globally and then also in Europe in different studies, is very relevant for maritime spatial planning. It helps us to bring together what is happening in ecosystems and how it impacts us on a daily basis nowadays as well as the future. So we can see and try to find the ways how we can integrate that in coastal development, in marine development. And when understanding this ecosystem service concept, it's very important really to understand how ecosystem is functioning. And as we have been hearing in plenary, that actually that has been a very difficult challenge for many countries to understand how ecosystem is functioning, how the structures are set up in ecosystem, and where is the role of human well-being. And in that perspective, it's very important that science is supporting us, policymakers, stakeholders. They deliver us different evidences, and in that way our planning can become really evidence-based planning, and our decisions are more smarter and based on facts, and they help that our environment is really performing in longer time, or as nowadays we say, it becomes more resilient. So what are the aims of this workshop? We really want to explore different options, how to uptake this information, which is provided by research institutes or scientists in our ecosystem, in our maritime spatial planning, and how can we address different trade-offs, so advantages, disadvantages in maritime spatial planning process when we need to allocate spaces for different sea uses. And we also have allocated at least half an hour discussion time, really to give you a forum to bring up your experiences from local, regional, or national level or international level, how you see the ecosystem services can contribute to better maritime spatial planning in future. So we first start with 3 presentations. So we will start from national level, where we will have a very nice example from Sweden, from Swedish Agency of Marine and Water Management, Max Spretterbaum. Then we will have a presentation from regional level, and as we heard in plenary, Finland is one which makes regions very active in maritime spatial planning, and also have been dedicated a lot of resources for ecosystem service mapping. So Essi Kerpijoki from Finland will present their experience, and last not least, it comes to really applying that in business planning and blue economy planning, and then Jonne Kotta from Estonia will present, might be more local case, how this can be uptaken by business. So in all, we will have these discussion points at the end. So really to see particularly what are different ways how scientists, policy makers and planners can interpret this concept of ecosystem services, what are advantages of using ecosystem services in policy making, how we can integrate ecosystem services across different scales. As it was also mentioned, it's very important that maritime spatial planning is looking across the scales, implement multi-level governance perspective, and that we will also start to address this topic here. And last not least, we also want to address the challenge that very often information has not been really uptaken, even like provided by scientists or researchers, but policymakers are not really uptaking, and we would like to also hear your views. Might be this information needs to be presented in different ways that we can really make better usage of what we are having at our hands. So this is a brief introduction to the session, and now I think we need to rock with the good presentations. I don't know if you will continue traditions of Sweden to sing or not to sing, but yes, there are some fame that Sweden is singing.
No, we're not going to sing. Thank you. We're going to rock. No. Thank you, everyone. Thank you that I can be here and for the opportunity to talk to you. I'm Max Wretman. I don't work with marine spatial planning. Sorry, I don't work with marine spatial planning, but I work with MSFD. But these are both different instruments that we use to manage our ecosystems in a sustainable way. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about the experience I have had working with ecosystem services analysis, which I've done for a while, which has been very interesting work, and also work that I have done lots with colleagues from in the network of Europe, and also even more in the network of HELCOM, which has been very, very fun. And the question I'm asking of the work we have done, has it been worth it? Is it worth it to do these kind of analysis? So background, I have conducted ecosystem services analysis for 2 programs of measures within the MSFD and 1 initial assessment. And I haven't done them alone. I have worked extensively collaboration with SLU, Lena and colleagues, and later on also with Carolyn. This has been very important for the development to make it have a scientific sort of base, but still trying to find pragmatic solutions in a field where the methods are still evolving and where the data is sparse. So having a pragmatic approach has been really important to get anything done, I would say. So our sort of mode of action, how we have worked, is mainly through different kind of linkage frameworks on a big scale. So for ecosystem services in the Baltic Sea or in the North Sea, and how do they link up to different relevant parts of the MSFD. So activities, for example, how do marine activities impact ecosystem services, and to what extent are they dependent on ecosystem services? And this is something we did in the, is this a light, or I shouldn't? No. Okay. So this is an analysis we did for the initial assessment, where we have this diagram, and the further out you are on the diagram, the higher is your dependent on ecosystem services, and the higher up you are on the axis, the bigger impact you have. And this is a way to sort of illustrate, and also the size of the bubbles in the diagram is a representation of their size in economic terms, in BNP terms in Sweden. So it's a way to give a sort of introduction how these different sectors relate to ecosystem services. And you can see that fishing, for example, has a very high dependent on ecosystem services as well as a big impact. Marine tourism, not as big impact, still an impact, but also a big dependence. But the economy is much larger. You can see shipping in harbor, for example, rather big activities that isn't that dependent on ecosystem services, but have a quite large impact. So these are one of the analyses we have done. So another one, working in the same way, linking ecosystem services, and in this case to our Swedish environmental targets, the Article 10 targets, for you MSFD heads out there. And I will describe it here, how we worked with that analysis, and this is what we did in the last programs of measures in Sweden. We had 3 different analyses that was done within sort of the MSFD work that we needed to do to develop the measures, and they were not developed in concert, so they were different analyses, but we sort of baked them together in a pragmatic approach and trying to answer the questions that are relevant for the directive and when you develop programs of measures. So first we had a gap analysis where we evaluate how well our new measures, how well they decrease the gap to the different targets. So what was the positive effect on our targets? And we did that for all the measures, for North Sea and the Baltic Sea. Sorry, you can't really read, this is really small, but it's just showing you that there is an analysis that has been done. So that was the first step. And the next step was linking linking environmental quality standards, so the environmental targets, to ecosystem services. And here you have the targets on the upper column, and then you have the different ecosystem services. And this is the work that SLU has been doing. These kind of linkages, this is how we work, the work we have done. So this is expert opinion, but that has been supportive with data where it's where there is data, and that's relevant. So that is sort of the base for the analysis. So using this, we could derive how much each target or each measure affected ecosystem services. To what extent did they have a potential to increase ecosystem services, and what ecosystem services? And from that we used that increase in ecosystem services and quantified them by using a willingness to pay study for what people were willing to pay to reach good environmental status in the Swedish part of the Baltic Sea. Similar studies I know have been done in Finland and in Germany. So by using these 3 steps, we could derive a result. And what the results show is that obviously these are really insecure results. But what they show is it's highly likely that the benefits from our program of measures, from all the measures, vastly outweigh the costs. And we have a big interval of different different outcomes, and for benefits it's tenfold the difference. So it's a big gap, but even still, looking at those cost gap and the benefit gap, they don't really overlap. So it's probable that this is a good investment for society. And then we illustrated this by showing the targets. So you have the targets on the left-hand side. The bigger the box, the more impact the target, increasing the target, getting better status for the target, the more ecosystem services will come from it. And then they move to 4 different themes of ecosystem services, from supportive, regulatory, producing, and cultural. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but A1, the blue box, is eutrophication, C3 is fish stocks, and C4 is marine food webs, and those are the targets that our analysis showed the biggest increase in ecosystem services. So the value for management. We need to do this kind of analysis, and we need to report them to EU. But the process I described, nothing in that process made us choose one measure over the other. Okay? So it didn't change anything from A to B. However, it showed that decision makers, our decision maker could take the decision that it's probably a good investment. It's supported by economic analysis. So that's important. But the thing is, could we have done it with lesser analysis? We don't need to do an ecosystem service analysis. We could have probably written it. So it's required in the Swedish legislation. But I have to say that I had very little feedback from the work we have done from outside the network. So inside our network with the experts in HELCOM and other countries, we have had discussion on these different things. But it doesn't really go all the way to change the decision. And that's really what you want from this kind of analysis, I guess. Other values, something to start a discussion, maybe internally also get people to realize and recognize how the ecosystem goes together and how it relates to societal activities. Absolutely. So worth it. As I said, and this is need to be understood that this is in a Swedish context. We don't have the history of using economic analysis to make our decisions. So if you're looking in the UK, for example, you have really like a quota. If the benefit goes over the costs for some quota, then you can go ahead with the project. We don't really have that culture. We don't have that understanding among our decision makers. So, however, working with ecosystem-based management that we both are within the MSFD and in the marine spatial planning, ecosystem analysis are essential, I would say. And I think one important part is the bridge it makes between the natural environmental science and the societal sciences, which is very important. But we need to, and we're trying to better understand the intended use for each analysis to ensure relevance. So what is the decision we are trying to inform, and how can we inform the decision makers in a way that these kind of analysis make sense? So, for example, many of decision makers don't understand these concepts, or they don't understand the particular ecosystem services, which you need to explain the framework before they can understand it. And what we have tried to do when we are working right now with ecosystem-based management on a regional level with local stakeholders is trying to not talk so much about ecosystem services, but we're trying to make them be included in our analysis around the ecosystem. So it's very important to determine the appropriate type of ecosystem analysis based on the management need. And this is really, this is hard, I think, we are finding out, but it feels valuable, and I think what we are doing right now on a regional scale in our pilot areas, I can just show you. So this is quite interesting. This is something we have, Lena and Caroline have developed together with stakeholders in one of our pilot areas in the Botnian Sea. So each of these arrows, depending on what they're interested about, what group they're in, they have looked closer to. So you can sort of just take out one part of it, and then you can discuss it. And this is, so we are now developing a program of measures on that scale, but the difference here is now the people that are going to make decision on what sort of measures to go for, they are involved in the actual analysis, the process. And we can just see that their knowledge about the ecosystem and how it works sort of gets better. And also the next step that we are, for us, taking is where can we find parts of the measures or conflicts between different activities where we can develop an ecosystem analysis that can really support that and help that process. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very. Okay, thank you very much for this really good, interesting picture. And I would say it's a very practical example where ecosystem service knowledge are uptaking. So it's in Marine Strategy Framework Directive, so program of measures. And we know from debate in maritime spatial planning domains that actually maritime spatial planning also should contribute to good environmental status, which is also aim of MSFD.
Yeah.
So in that context, I have a question, did you also came to spatial resolution, spatial dimension in carrying out this assessment and linking activities and ecosystem services and measures?
No, not on the national scale, but we're trying to do it more on the regional scale. And I think why we haven't done it on a national scale is we don't have the sort of the data on that level to do it. And also, as our planners would probably agree with, that our targets is not, they're not really specific enough in many of the areas to make them sort of, that you can translate them to a map. But we're working towards that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Max.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you, at the end, you touch this regional dimension, and I think we will hear more about regional approaches. So I would like to invite AC. So thank you. Yes, your presentation slides are available.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Essi and from Finnish MSP Cooperation, and I'm going to tell you about ecosystem services information in regional level MSP. So I'm representing the Finnish MSP Cooperation. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our unique planning approach on the next slide. And our work, we have effective MSP approved in 2020, and now we are in our second planning round, and the new plans supposed to be approved in 2027. A little bit about agenda. I'm going to start with the regional perspective, then tell you a little bit about the valuable areas for ecosystem services, specifically in Finland's marine areas, then more about specifically cultural ecosystem services, and in the end, how ecosystem services are reflected on our ongoing MSP round. So this our unique approach, maybe some of you are familiar with, that our MSP is conducted together by the regions. So we have 8 coastal councils, regions, and as it is mandated in Land Use and Building Act, we jointly prepare and align plans for both territorial waters and EEZ. And I'm representing all these 8 councils. And these 8 councils together prepare one national maritime spatial plan that is again divided geographically into 3 regional parts. In 2024, the Finnish Environment Institute published these valuable areas for ecosystem services in Finland's marine areas study that was commissioned by Finnish MSP coordination group and financed by Finnish Environmental Ministry of Environment. And the study identified key marine areas valuable for ecosystem services, known as ESPA areas. And those ESPA areas in Finnish maritime area are based on comprehensive spatial data, participatory mapping, and stakeholder collaboration, and following the CICES classification. That means that they are divided in the regulating services, provisioning services, and cultural services. And this specific study seeks to balance offshore wind power development with ecosystem service values. Originally, it was its main focus, but more broadly, it supports our ongoing MSP work. Key messages from the study we got for our planning was to show actually the importance of ecosystem services in MSP. Now the ecosystem services are mapped across Finland's marine and coastal zones, also make the benefits provided by biodiversity actually visible to people, and hopefully help to safeguard ecosystem functions, and help our planners to consider where ecosystem services should be or can be protected, restored, and sustainably used, and also guide future use of marine ecosystems. And fourth thing was that the data were produced directly in a spatial format, that we can use it in our MSP work. Something that is adding a new value to our MSP is specifically the cultural ecosystem services. So for the very first time, areas that are important for recreation and nature-based tourism have been comprehensively mapped. So it consists of participatory online mapping survey that gathered local and experimental knowledge on meaningful and culturally valuable places. And other sources were data included like recreation, so camping, hiking, fishing, overnight stays, bird watching, and valuable landscapes and marine heritage, and also data from previous participatory GIS surveys. How does it look on the map then? We get almost 2,000 respondents, so, and total over 6,000 markings, including separate written descriptions on the map and on our planning area. And in the way we get our significant areas for cultural ecosystem services, the method includes areas that are maximum 200 meters from the coastline, and all data layers were transformed into density surfaces and then scaled to a common range and then summed. The highest 5% of the values were identified as the significant areas, and after that results validated in a workshop with our MSP planners. And altogether, 71 areas with separate descriptions of services we now got on the map. And how are we going to utilize the significant areas for cultural ecosystem services in our MSP? On the left-hand side, you see the cultural ecosystem services markings, and on the right side is our current MSP plan, and there is markings with cultural values, tourism, and recreational connections. And now when we are updating it, we can take those cultural ecosystem services into account. And maybe more broadly, how ecosystem services are reflected in our ongoing MSP round. So all this data that we now have, we are able to more systematically integrate that into planning process, and particularly those ESPA areas. And we are also applying the ecosystem-based approach in our planning process, and that's an ecosystem services are important component of that. And we are also using the HELCOM VASAB's soon to be upgraded ecosystem-based approach principles in our current planning round. In ecosystem-based maritime spatial planning, we are doing, that's just a picture about it, and the utilization of ecosystem services and incorporating relevant human activities is important component of our ecosystem-based planning practices. One more perspective to this ecosystem services we are now working with. We have created these thematic perspectives, 3 of them. One of them is climate smart MSP. It's part of our draft plan phase and part of also our ongoing CA process. We have created these 3 theme-based planning perspectives, and one of them is climate smart MSP. And regulating ecosystem services form an important layer of this thematic perspective to support sustainable and resilient MSP work. But thank you for your time, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Essi. I think actually the maps were a national level and not so much regional. I would say, so you take the same approach all over 3 regions?
We have done all those regionally, but we also always combine them to one map. So we start work in regional level, then we create those 3 planning areas, and then we always combine then to one map.
So at the end, it's all harmonized way how you present it on inland.
Yes, because we have a lot of stakeholders that are not in specific area, but in the whole area. So we always have one comprehensive map, but that's right. That's how we do it.
Okay, thank you, Essi. And now the 3rd presentation. Yeah, applauses. Yeah. And the 3rd is Jonne from Estonia, University of Tartu, about aquaculture. So another example. So we heard different examples already, and this will be business-oriented example. I hope so.
So hello, good afternoon to all of you. I'm so happy to see you all here. So it's full house, and I feel like a rock star. I can actually play some instruments, but I should behave, and so I'm acting here as a researcher, in fact. So I'm not a businessman, but my talk is a bit towards towards this topic. So this is about blue bioeconomy and a bit of low trophic thing, and emphasizing that you still can do it, as we saw in Estonian presentation this morning. So they had this, yes, we can. So it's not easy, but yeah, but this is a state of art. So what we have to understand, you of course you know all about it, is that all human actions have an impact. It can be positive, negative, it's mostly negative, and the biggest challenge what we face nowadays is that we used to have very few pressures or human actions that caused pressures. Nowadays we have too many, and those are interacting in a quite unpredictable way, unless we study them carefully. And when it comes to the Baltic Sea, the situation is a little bit easier in a way that we have lots of data and knowledge and understanding, and we have some keystone pressures, if we might say, and one of them is eutrophication, because we have this legacy of nutrients embedded into the Baltic Sea, and that causes harmful blooms and anoxia and loss of biodiversity and all those things. And as a consequence, I always say that instead of showing numbers and should I talk louder? Okay, I might just go closer because I can hear my voice perfectly. Sorry about it. So I'm always telling that you should, if possible, dive underwater and see what this is about, because sometimes you have an indicator saying that we are like a 1 or 0 or 0.6. What does it mean? And this is what it is actually. So on the left side we have a degraded benthic habitat, and our goal is to turn it into a nice, pristine community. We have a good news still, because we have this HELCOM and the goodwill of many countries. And if we look what it used to be in the past, like talking last centuries, 80s, 70s, when we had a huge amount of all these toxic substances like heavy metals and a few other things, then nowadays those concentrations have dropped tremendously. Sometimes 10, sometimes 100, sometimes thousands of times. So this is a good news. So the sea is not toxic anymore. But the problem is that it's a bit like a over-fertilized potato field. So we have too many nutrients, but you can turn this picture other ways around. You can look at the problem as if it was a resource. So nutrients, normally you have to dig them from the ground, make a mineral nutrients, then use in aquaculture or agriculture, and that all costs you something. But if you consume nutrients that are free to use, what you actually do, you are consuming a problem, and if you are good enough or lucky enough, you can turn this into something good, like a good food or feed or whatever. The million-dollar question is, of course, how to do it and what's feasible and what's not. Because if I was I'm actually a mussel farmer, but if I would start it as a mussel farming thing, then I would go farming in Chile or New Zealand or those places, because this is way more easier. But we actually need those sorts of low trophic thing in the Baltic Sea, because we have a legacy nutrients and there are not too many options how to get the nutrients out of the sea. So you can fish, of course, because if you're catching a fish, you can get also nutrients out of the sea. But the problem is you can't catch as much as you need to remove the nutrients, because you have these quotas. And of course, you're destroying the ecosystem. And this is not something you want to do. So you have to do it in a clever way, because the Baltic Sea, I don't know how much you know about the salinity response to the marine organisms, but what's happening here in the Baltic Sea, that all marine organisms are way smaller than they used to be in the ocean, or even in the North Sea. And that means that if you are farming mussels, the size of mussels is so small that if you start to remove the meat out of a shell, you probably consume more energy than you get. So it's not a viable business, I would say. So you have to do it smart. But coming to the next. So first, you have to understand where you can cultivate it. And in order to understand it, you have to have a good ecological knowledge, and then you have some very good tools, modeling tools for it. So one is a DEB, which is a dynamic energy budget modeling. That's a very sophisticated thing and a bulletproof kind of model. And what it does, it can quantify flows of nutrients, flows of carbon. So basically, they quantify the ecosystem services. So, and you can quantify how much there is availability of those things and how much these mussel farms or seaweed farms are consuming those kinds of things and where they grow and how much. And then you can define the borders, so where you can cultivate these things and where you can't. And those maps can be put to the Maritime Spatial Planning maps if you want it. So you have for each area you can quantify what is a potential yield for certain types of farming, so which is good. And you can also deliver or provide a delivery of services, how much they clean up the environment. And then, of course, these dynamic energy budget models, you can couple with ecosystem models and hydrodynamics to understand a bit like how the things are moving around the sea to make it even more complex. And then eventually, you can develop those kinds of maps. So for the mussels and seaweed, so you can show the potential areas. There is making sense to cultivate different things. And now the things becomes even more complicated because you have to try it real conditions. Because one is a theory, another thing is doing it real. And of course, to start the business, then you should collaborate as much as possible with the existing businesses. And when it comes to aquaculture and the Baltic Sea, the only thing what you have, like in a commercial scale, is a fish farming. So fish farmers are also very much interested to reduce their burden to the Baltic Sea. At least in Estonia, they can't get licenses unless they prove that they are environmentally friendly, and this almost means they are like a zero-emitting farms. And this is something how we actually started in Estonia. So we developed mussel farms, not so much at the beginning to produce a feed of food, but more to turn this fish farm, which was not a very big one, into the zero-emitting farm. So it doesn't, it gives to the environment certain amounts of nutrients and nitrogen and phosphorus, but then the same amount of nutrients is captured by mussels. So, and if you want it, you can even develop another types of maps. So you can quantify how much mussel farms you need to mitigate effects of fish farms. So, and in a way, if you produce a fish locally, it's still having a smaller environmental burden than if you produce the fish outside somewhere far away, accompanied with a huge environmental impacts, and then transporting it to Estonia. So you have to find the balances. But coming more to this low-trophic aquaculture, then you have some other tools what you can deploy, and those are available, and we developed it. So it's a web-based. So if you are interested in where you can cultivate the seaweeds and mussels and how much they deliver different ecosystem services, you can draw the maps and make these outcomes, so you can see the environmental conditions in certain area of interest. So you could just draw a rectangle somewhere or a more complicated polygon. Then you can get also some conditions that might be interesting for a businessman. For example, how much ice you expect there, what are the wave conditions, and then of course all these production yield, and then ecosystem services. So businessmen, they're not that much interested in ecosystem services, they're interested in benefits, but these services can help them to become economically feasible. And then up there, you have another type of model, then you can do the scale up, because the thing is that mussels are so efficient filter feeders that if you put them a lot into this certain amount of constrained water body, then you get almost like a distilled water. So it's coming very clear. And of course, that reduces the growth. And in order to avoid it, you can even calculate what is the density of ropes you can cultivate in these mussel farms to get a reasonable yield. And then, along with the existing mussel farms, what we did, we also quantified the sort of environmental impact in terms of water framework directives. We have all those sort of nutrients and then phytoplankton and zooplankton and microphytoplankton and a few other things. And then what we could see that in many instances the impacts are really positive in many farms. But the thing what we also realize that currently we do not have a good monitoring methodology to assess the positive effects. We mostly have the negative effects, and this is also something to consider if we want to do the Green Deal and so similar. So it's very good to think about it, how to map the positive impacts, because otherwise we can't document it unless some scientists are doing it. And then what we also observed, this seagrass meadow, for example, that was adjacent to the mussel farm that was devoid of this epiphyte, so it was in a very healthy state. And the visibility, if you dive there, they have a few meters more visibility. And this is another completely new story. So it's a seaweed farming out of the box, another type of species never deployed before. And we have tried it 2 years and the results are very promising. But, there is also but. In order to make it a viable business, you have to valorize. And this is also something we are working very hard. Like day before yesterday, one of my PhD students finished a PhD study, and this was all about valorization. So basically what we do, we try to teach the interested enterprises how to cultivate and how to valorize. And if in order you do it jointly, then you can get it in economically some economical revenue. So you can earn some money, which is good. And then if those farms are distributed, not the big farms, but smaller farms here and there, you can also increase some activities in remote areas, because those things are mostly done in remote areas. And you can also increase water quality of area. So thank you very much.
Do you have it in Estonia, this kind of already experiments in the real life that you can demonstrate this nutrient zero business?
Legally, we don't have any kind of solid law about it, but our environmental board is very much interested in it, and we have quantified the ecosystem service delivered by the mussel farms, the real mussel farm, and then they take this into account when they are licensing. So this is, and of course, as I also said, that I'm also a mussel farmer, kind of, and then, we try to expand these businesses to a way that, to show that sustainable economy is possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Jonne. And now I hope to engage you in our workshop. And first I would like to know, whom do you represent? Are you a planner yourself? Please raise your hands. One, okay, few planners. Yes. Are you policy makers? So the ones which are making policy, deciding? Yes, we do have few. Might be some practitioners. Yes, okay. I think in one or another way we are practitioners. Let's see. We want to engage you in small Menti, so I would like to ask to put first question, and as you can see, everybody will have similar questions, but we really want to collect different views from your own perspective. So I would like to ask you to go to menti.com, and there is a code 82903356. So 82903356. Unfortunately, we didn't make the QR code. Nowadays, everybody is used to make a QR code, but yeah. 8 digits. Oh, it's complicated. It's double time of 2 PIN codes, you know. Good. And the first, everybody will have a chance to answer. So first, I would like to ask policymakers to reply on this question. How do you interpret ecosystem services concept in marine context? And you can range it and to express your agreement or disagreement on 4 alternative options, which we are providing to you. And the ones who do not feel policymakers, they can skip this because you will have a chance in next round. So we have at least 9 policymakers. Good. And interesting that, yeah, there are quite equal balance between 4 alternatives, how we see it. But MSP is leading, interestingly, in this group. Okay, maybe we can go to the next slide, which is about practitioners. And I think majority of you probably are practitioners. And here we would like also the same 4 alternatives as in previous, and we would like to ask now that practitioners are voting. So which of the, how do you interpret the ecosystem service concept in marine environment? Are you linked that it's a concept to protect marine ecosystem, or it's a concept of assessing economic benefits and boosting blue economy, concept for enhancing social benefits and justice, or concept for informing MSP and governance through revealed trade-offs between different uses and the sea? And so the third group, I hope everybody has managed. At least 26 answers are here given, 27. So might be then let's go to third one. Researchers. Now it's time for you. We left the last for you because if we will give a first round for researchers, then everybody will follow your answers because they will think that you can provide the correct answer. So the last answer is from researchers. How do you see the concept of ecosystem services? I would say it seems that the people who are in this group, in this room, are very in similar minds, that actually ecosystem service concept really can inform maritime spatial planning and governance through different trade-off analysis. And yes, to see what are gains and losses if we are taking one or another decision. And thank you for saying this one and expressing your views. We wanted really to see, and maybe somebody of you are ready to comment also. How do you see about these opinions? Has it been surprising that MSP is seen as actually the leading tool, instrument where we pick up, where we are utilizing this knowledge and information about ecosystem services? I should ask, might be some people who are in maritime spatial planning. Lembe, can you comment on that? Who is those planners? I will give this mic and take one.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Philip from BizEdge, and I'm personally a bit surprised that MSP is the big key for ecosystem services, because I'm from my perspective at least, I don't know a plan where looking at ecosystem services, the planning decision has changed because of this information. And from at least some examples I know, the data or information going into ecosystem service mostly comes from other environmental data like protected species, and so it's just, or it can be just a different label. So whereas the new information for the MSP level, that is tricky, and I know from terrestrial planning, then there can be very good examples how this can lead to different planning decisions. But for us, also far out in the EZ, for Germany, as we at BSH, we are not responsible for the coastal areas. It's tricky to see this direct connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Philip. How about others? I think Essi from Finland, I don't see you. Okay. So you were commenting actually how practically you take in. So wasn't this so convenient that it could be taken into board? Looking what Finland was presenting, that actually there is a way how to uptake.
Yeah, maybe we haven't looked into that enough, and I think it's also more easier to grasp with a Finnish example because you have the coastal areas too, and all the islands and the cultural values where we don't have that. So it's easier to get into that theme in general. Yeah, and maybe we have less data to connect to that, but it's good to dive into the Finnish example and explore it.
Thank you. So some new inspirations. So we heard a few examples, but maybe other countries can also share some positive ways of uptaking this ecosystem service concept in maritime spatial planning or in other planning. Jan?
Thank you. Jan from the Swedish MSP authorities. Yes, I think actually that it may sound a bit strange, but to actually be a reason for changing things in the policy doesn't have to be the only reason for doing it. I mean, I think ecosystem services assessments, they, as I see it, try to deepen the understanding and showing linkages between nature values and economic benefits. So in that sense, I think like Max's example is where we have kind of positive environmental measures. It's perhaps okay that it shows that it kind of confirms the positive result. But I'm thinking that for MSP, it could also be more that there might be negative effects of certain activities, and that could be highlighted through ecosystem services assessments. I have a question. Can I raise that? Because I'm thinking, I have the feeling that from the EU perspective, the focus on ecosystem services is kind of going down. And also, it's kind of mirrored in the Swedish, from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, and it's not that, and also for green infrastructure, which are kind of linked. So the question is, are you sharing that view, and what's the reason for that? Like in the biodiversity strategy and so.
So you think that this concept might be getting out of fashion or getting not really popular? I see Anda is raising hand.
Yes, hello, Anda from BEF. I think it's what Jonne was demonstrating, that this actually through this services we can applying this concept for ecosystem services in restoration of marine habitats, and this is in relation to nature restoration law objectives. So this concept has raising its value now. So maybe it's just going under some transformation on how it is applied. So it's just an impression from my side.
Thank you. No, I think I can understand that people are frustrated with ecosystem services because they will say, what has it contributed to? Everybody talked about it, but we haven't really applied it. Maybe I should have made, or what I was trying to say, I think the analysis we did were pretty good, but we did it in our own corner, like it wasn't applied within the management. So it needs to be applied within in a real way to make a difference.
Thank you for. Then I would like to ask to put the next slide. Actually, about advantages. Yeah, what do we see? Are there advantages of using ecosystem services in policy making and planning? And here you can provide some free answers, because we will, of course, also follow up our discussion from this little bit more than 1 hour discussion, but yeah, to take up your ideas while we are discussing, because one comment was from Sweden that it hasn't been really applied yet, this concept, but I know, and I heard last week in conference, that Latvia has really applied, and I would like to give the microphone to Solvita. Yes, because actually I see at least our country has been applying it in MSP.
Yes, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a conference where we showed maps with our benthic biotopes and what kind of ecosystem services they provide. So, and I think, and there, of course, these areas where our high ecosystem services will be incorporated in our marine protected areas, and so this will be also provided as layer for MSP. So I think that's a way how we can incorporate those ecosystem services in MSP.
So it is through, first level is nature conservation, so designing new protected areas, and then this layer is introduced and in new MSP in that way. Okay, any other might be example or comments? Oh, lot of more about showing values and highlighting values, and it doesn't seem that really the pushing trade-offs or decision making at the moment. What, Dmitry, why you say no? On the comment?
Yeah, Dmitry from Helcom. Actually, I have big doubts in the value of this concept in general. For example, in the ecosystem-based approach guideline, we use it with the caution. So we really can't see, despite of the whole effort and all this classification and everything, so it seems more just like a tool to communicate between environmentalists and economists.
Thank you for the view. I see, yeah, here is a hand is raised. Miguel?
Yeah, thank you. I agree on your point, but I think that the problem is that when we apply the concept of ecosystem services in the context of spatial planning, only on spatial planning, it's not enough just to map biotopes and say that there are biotopes and these biotopes provide a certain amount of services. I think we have to go a step forward, and we need to understand not just the number of services, but the quantity and quality of the services that they provide. Because we can make an ecosystem services assessment, and then we provide information to planners and for marine spatial planning, but then we don't know if the services that are being supplied actually correspond to a supply on the level that the ecosystem is in a good state or in a bad state. So we should not look only on ecosystem services alone, but also like in things like good environmental status, good ecological status, and condition. That's my point.
Yeah. I think what Miguel is mentioning is really good. I think we have been abusing of the categorical or the qualitative classification of species or biotopes and so on. There was this term of replacing species with ecosystem services before, like there is some kind of direct correlation between one thing and the other, but this has been the common approach. We are not moving from there beyond just putting labels in A or B case, instead of trying to be more quantitative. And before ecosystem services, I was thinking about ecosystem functioning, actually. Actual processes, quantification of processes, and understanding those processes before thinking about direct benefit or flow. And this is something that we are continuously forgetting. There is a lot of work done in research that is not permitting, is not moving into actual decision making or management that is related to that. And I think this is one of the biggest gaps. We don't think quantitatively about this. We are not thinking about processes. We keep talking about this approach of using it as a way of communicating. This biotope, this species provides, according to my opinion, expert opinion, this or that service, and we stay there. So I think there is the need to move to something more quantitative.
Yes, so, yeah.
And may I also step to a little bit other area. When we speak about ecosystem services, we are so much focused on species, on biota and biotopes. But biotopes is also substrate. It also a chemical interaction between bottom sediments and water column. All that is supposed to be taken into account. And what happens with all that interactions in case of such ecosystem services space for wind farms? From this, like chemical, geological, hydrochemical point of view. So that's, we are kind of leave it aside from quantification, but if we try to monitorize that, and if we try to compare the value over extraction over mineral resources, including fossil fuels and so on. So I'm stepping in completely red zone, right? So the economic value of that is huge. So how we can compare it with the value of lost species and biotopes or compare to that value. So I deliberately stepping in this red zone just to demonstrate an extreme case and extreme danger of a direct monetarization of the value of these or those species. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Is there any other view? Yeah.
Thank you. Louise Forsblom from the Finnish Environment Institute. I agree completely with Francisco that we need to move more towards processes, but at the same time, we also need to show that habitats have a value, and we are often asked to produce maps that cover broad areas, and then we need to use the information that we have, and that's not nothing.
Okay, any other point about concept? Yeah. Values?
Just from what Francisco was saying, so I don't disagree, but what do we do with the numbers when we quantify them? What does they mean for management? Would be my follow-up.
I mean, it's pretty easy because before what we have nowadays is a bit like we know that this is a forest, but we don't know if it's 10 trees or 100 trees or billions of trees. And that has a very huge difference. And very often what you have to prioritize. So this area is more important than another area. If you quantitatively don't know how much, you can't do this. Everything is very same. So it's very useful.
Sorry. Just quite, I mean, that means that you have to quantify everything within that area. Yeah, I mean, what you don't quantify will not be included in the valuation of the area. So I think that's the challenge. And how do you quantify different processes? How do you quantify lessening eutrophication effects with the other values that you get from the area? I'm just saying that we still need the process to interpret the data, which will always include values, our own values. We can't skip that, I think, and that's a very big part, and that's a very hard part of the work.
Okay, who should interpret data? Would you comment? Who should?
I shall. No, I agree about with the problem of having to quantify. The problem is that today is not quantified. It's what I think. Okay, my expert opinion says that if I don't have the data, I will say what I think is the best. To a certain point, that's reasonable when you don't have the information. But when the information is in parallel, being produced all the time in science, but we are not using it, just because we are thinking that it's too difficult to integrate or too complex to communicate, or we are not doing a process of prioritizing that kind of information, what is valuable and what is not, we keep going to the same places all the time. So I stay on the expert base because it's easier to communicate, it's faster to implement. So I think there is a moment in which we need to understand what is the gradient in which, or a gradient in which we try to move more quantitatively without discarding the expert base, because we know that there are certain things that we cannot quantify or we don't have the quantification. So we need to try to go into these more hybrid approaches in which we try to incorporate both sources of information.
Okay, so different debates about quantification and understanding and interpretation, and giving this knowledge to policy makers. And here it comes to my question. Actually, when organizing this conference, we talked about the importance of local, regional, and national level to respect the differences between the scales. Do you really see that in ecosystem service assessment and mapping scale is very important element, or actually we need to have a harmonized approach irrespective what kind of scale the decision will be taken? How do you see from your experience? Should it be different depending on planning scale, or we see it shouldn't be? What are your experiences? Who can contribute? Your example was mentioned. I think that you are working together with Max on regional scale. Do you see the difference between regional, national scale in terms of ecosystem service quantification?
Yes, in a way, because I think the stakeholders are maybe one of the most different parts. So the actual users of the ecosystem services are quite different from a local scale to a national scale. And so when we see the MSP, which is done in the marine area for Sweden, it's very much focused on the large kind of sectors like transport and wind energy and so on. But when you get to the local scale of planning, then you're much more focused on the local users of these ecosystem services. So it becomes quite a question about fairness, I guess, like who gets to use what, when, and where. So I think it's important to have the analysis done on these local scales and also on the national scale.
Kerstin Blie-Joyce, I work for Nordregio. And I worked quite a lot with the ecosystem services at the Swedish EPA, Jan. It's not my fault that you... Just saying. No, I just wanted to add, because I think there's also... when you think about identifying ecosystem services, mapping ecosystem services, valuing ecosystem services, so maybe describing qualitatively or quantitatively or in monetary terms or combining it, then scales can be very different. So when you talk about valuation, for example, it could be extremely local. It could also be at a very regional scale. Just to add that yes, it all levels depends, but it also depends on your purpose, what you intend to do, mapping or valuing, or I hope you agree.
Thank you. Some other feedback, comments? So it really depends on purpose. So are we just mapping, or are we also valuing? But there I heard a comment that actually monetary valuing of ecosystem might not be the right approach. Even we heard about willingness to pay studies, and it actually brings up the values for decision makers in terms of Swedish krona or euros. So, and that's actually, I think, where policymakers are really interested to see also the numbers what are behind. You want, yeah, final comments?
I haven't yet formulated this notion very well. From regional perspective, from kind of the perspective of the Baltic Sea, we, such as tourism and other ecosystem services, wouldn't be rendered or offered or monetized if, for example, we didn't stop eutrophication. They might be not connected directly, but they are connected indirectly and everyone can see it, like physically see in the sea. So I suspect that it is not a, so to say, we do not select which scale. The key target is the healthy Baltic Sea. But what method we use, either good environmental status or ecosystem functions or ecosystem services, it doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you. And actually we are over time already, a couple of minutes, but I think we could continue the discussions, and I hope many of you will stay also for tomorrow workshop, where we will bring up these preliminary answers on the questions and continue with different experiences and views. Really, thank you very much for your engagement and your thoughts. And I would like to say thanks, particular thanks to our speakers. So first, Max, thank you. Thank you also, Essi, for your contribution. And last but not least, also Jonne for your contribution. And now everybody deserves a coffee break and go to the next sessions in half an hour. See you. Thank you.